Hello, everyone. Today we'll learn another category of Mukzeh, but I was thinking about a very interesting connection. First of all, at the very, very beginning of our study, when we learned the laws of brachot, we said that mitzvot tzrichot kavanah, that commandments or good deeds need for us to have the proper consciousness and intention in what we're doing it. And without it, it's not like we didn't keep the mitzvah, but there's a essential part of it missing. So today we'll learn about intention and consciousness in a different way in terms of uh, it does create a isur, prohibition or not. But today is also the 90th yortzeit of Rav Avram Yitzchak Cohen Kook, the first chief rabbi of Eretz Israel. He became the first chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, and when he came to Israel, and then right after that, Eretz Israel, his whole way of life was about combining the Torah with the practical mitzvah of Yeshuv Eretz Israel, of settling the land. And so a lot of people at his time criticized him until today that he rounds corners or cuts corners in Halacha, but from everything that I learned about him, that there isn't even one such example. Just one example that is, I think, the exact opposite. Um, our rabbis learn all kinds of special ideas from the wording. 2 weeks ago, last week, Rabbi Hertzfeld spoke about lotit godedu, which means lo lasot agudot, to not become separate, sectarian societies and organizations. If you have the same goal, you should try to unite as much as possible. And that's not the pshat of the verse, and it's definitely not a prohibition of the Torah. It's just good advice to also add that, besides the idea of not cutting ourselves. But an example that relates to Rav Kook's life is he was the first one who suggested to sell the land of Israel temporarily to a non-Jew during the year of Shemitah, the sabbatical year, in order to allow people to continue farming in a permissible manner, because otherwise they would starve to death. And when people objected to him, they used the verse "Lo techonem," which I believe in Pashat Ve'et Hanan, which the rabbis in the Gemara have all kinds of explanations for that. And one of them was, do not give them, meaning the idol worshippers, Chanaya Bakarka, meaning a permanent ownership of the land. And Rav Kook said, this isn't permanent. It's just like you sell your chametz and after Pesach you get it back. We are temporarily selling the land of Israel, and we're going to get it back after the Shemitah year. So again, that's taking a little bit of a mitzvah out of context, and Rav Kook, with his greatness, was able to prove that, or to prove to those who were willing to listen, that that is the proper way. So Shabbat is very, very big in Rav Kook's writings, and he also writes about the kavanah, about this intention, in Musar Avicha, which is his book about very basic morals and ethics. And he always saw the larger picture. Like if he saw a Jew doing something that they weren't supposed to, he would say they must have a good reason. There's even a skit. Maybe I'll pause for this. There's a skit of Underdos where they come to a city. They've never seen people driving on Shabbat, so one says to the other, "Oh, you see that that's a couple." So he's taking his wife to the hospital to give birth, and then another car, and it's only one person in it, and he says, "Oh, he must be going to the hospital to pick up his wife after giving birth on Shabbat." And then there's a tractor being driven. You don't go to the hospital with a tractor, so they really don't have an answer how to look at that in a positive way. But that reflects on what Rav Kook was able to see with those rose-shaded glasses, and to be melamed zchut on everybody. So let's learn more about kavanah. So if a muktzeh item was placed atop a non-muktzeh item with the intention that it stay there all of Shabbat, then the permitted item becomes muktzeh, as it serves as a basis, basis, or base for a forbidden object. For example, if one placed money on a table, then even though the table is not in itself muktzeh, since he placed muktzeh money on it intentionally, the table becomes muktzeh because it is now a basis davar asur, a base for something which is not permitted on Shabbat. In other words, the decision to place money on the table implies consent not to use the table on Shabbat, making the table muktzeh just like the money on it. And one of the most interesting details about this is even if the money were to fall off somehow during Shabbat, it would not matter since the table was muktzeh during Ben Hashmashot, between the stars. That's what the literal meaning is, but it means between sunset and when the stars come out. So it's about 20 minutes. Depends on where you are in the world and how high the city is. So it remains muktzeh all of Shabbat. So mikzato, so just because it was a little bit, it means for the whole Shabbat. So we just learned about the conscious decision. In contrast, if one did not intend for the money to stay on the table over Shabbat, but simply left it there by mistake on Thursday or Friday, then the table does not become muktzeh since he did not decide to make it a basis for something muktzeh. Nevertheless, lechatchila, one should still not move the table while the muktzeh item is on it. Rather, he should tilt the table so that the money falls off and then move the table wherever they want. However, if the muktzeh item would be damaged if it slid off upon falling to the floor, then one may move the table along with the muktzeh item, again, without having that conscious decision that should stay on it before Shabbat, to a place where the ladder can safely be slid off without being damaged. For example, if the muktzeh item is a smartphone, which would likely break if dropped, one may move the table elsewhere. Similarly, if the muktzeh item is a stone, and next to this table are fragile glass items that would likely break if the stone were to fall on them, one may move the table elsewhere on Shabbat. The same applies to a laptop left on the top of a book, valuable candlesticks left on a tray, valuable knives left in a case, raw potatoes left in a drawer, or tzedakah box left on the bima. If these items were intentionally placed there, then whatever they are resting upon becomes the basis davar asur and is muktzeh. If they were forgotten there, the base does not become muktzeh. And I guess what's interesting about the Bet Knesset, the shul, where a tzedakah box is on a bima, it's a responsibility usually of the gabbai to remove it before Shabbat. And that's what I remember from Beersheba, where the gabbai would make sure that it wasn't on there. But there wouldn't be a reason to move the bima anyway. But just this is a good practical example, and also it means that there could be more than one person's decision can affect the whole community, because somebody put the tzedakah box there Sunday morning, and then it comes Friday afternoon. Technically, all the people could or should be responsible to remove it before Shabbat. So it's just interesting that a conscious decision isn't only one person; it could be many people. And in a house, the money maybe somebody put it there intending to pick it up after, but they forgot. So then it goes back to the allowance. Sometimes during the week, one wishes to place something muktzeh in a closet, but because there is no space, he puts it on top of clothing in a closet. There is a disagreement whether such a placement renders the clothing muktzeh as a base for the davar asur. Some say that since ultimately the muktzeh was consciously placed atop the clothing becomes the basis. Others maintain that since the person did not intend for the muktzeh to be there specifically, but it simply ended up there, the item of clothing does not become a basis. In practice, when necessary, one may be lenient. So if you have 10 other pairs of pants that don't have muktzeh on them, you should choose that instead and avoid having to break Shabbat. So we'll stop here and open up for questions.